I hear the sound before I see anything. A child's voice, thin and steady, reciting words too old for a child to know. The syllables fall like drops of water, one after another, echoing from the sealed crate in the basement of St. Leonard's. It shouldn't be possible. The crate hasn't been opened in decades. The wood is dark, warped, nailed shut. Still, the voice comes, quiet but certain. It says the "Our Father," but slower, like it's savoring each word. The red candle on the floor flickers. The flame bends sideways as though someone breathes against it. I hold my breath, but the flame doesn't steady. Wax runs down the base, thick as blood, pooling against the stone. The air's colder here, yet the candle sweats as if heat presses from inside the walls. I don't move. I only listen. The child's voice breaks once, then begins again. The prayer starting over. A loop. A litany without end. Upstairs, the bell tolls once, low, heavy, carried through wood and stone. It shakes dust from the rafters. Then another toll, louder, nearer, and then nothing. No third strike, just silence stretched too thin. I know the bell tower's empty. No sacristan, no rope, no hands. But the sound is real. My bones vibrate with it. My teeth ache from it. The silence that follows isn't peace. It's the sound of a mouth waiting to speak. I turn toward the sacristy. The mirror on the far wall, tall and tarnished, carries my reflection with a delay. 2 seconds, maybe 3. I lift my hand. The mirror hesitates, then follows. The glass clouds over, gray like breath on winter glass, though I'm standing 10 feet away. Behind me in the reflection, the candle burns twice as tall as it does in the room. I don't want to look closer, but my eyes stay fixed. The mirror wants me to count the seconds wrong. The crate groans, nails creak as though the wood resettles. The voice inside hushes for a moment, like a child caught whispering after lights out. Then it begins again, softer. The same prayer, unfinished. Each word pressed through splinters and iron. The sound drags against my ears. I know no child is buried here. I know no choir practices in the basement. Still, I hear it. Every syllable bruises the silence deeper. The candle flares. The mirror blurs again. The bell stays silent. And I whisper into the cold air, my voice not meant for anyone living. It's too soon. It shouldn't begin yet. The candle sputters as if answering. The wax spits. Somewhere in the dark of the basement, something exhales, and the child's voice begins the prayer one more time. They told me the assignment was simple, a matter of records, not of faith. I didn't believe them, but I nodded all the same. That's what you do when someone from Rome gives you an order. You don't argue. You take the train, you carry the folder, and you try not to think about why the Vatican still remembers your name. My name is Father Henry Mercer, American. I studied theology in Rome years ago, long before anyone trusted me with anything important. Most of my life has been spent in Boston, teaching at the college, offering Mass, moving through the routines every priest knows by heart. My lectures were dry, my sermons careful. I was not the kind of priest chosen for secrets. I was the kind chosen for classrooms. That should have been the rest of my life. But a letter arrived with a seal I hadn't seen in decades, summoning me to New York, St. Patrick's Cathedral, midnight meeting, no explanation, only the line. You are to assist in the closure of St. Leonard's archive. The nave was dark when I arrived. Shadows spread between the columns. A single lamp lit the sacristy. Monsignor Patrick stood waiting, tall and motionless, hands folded behind his back. He didn't offer greeting, only turned, led me deeper into the side chapel, and spoke as if I'd already agreed. "This isn't complicated, Father," he said. His voice was thin, cold, worn from years of instruction. "You'll go to Boston, you'll catalog the sealed crates, you'll make certain the door's locked, and you'll follow 5 rules." He looked at me, as if daring me to write them down. I didn't. I only listened. The first rule was simple. Never read the seals aloud, not carved in stone, not written in ink, not stamped in wax, silent eyes only. The second rule, do not stay past the second toll of midnight. If you hear the bells twice, you leave, no matter what remains unfinished. The third rule, if you hear the archive whisper, never answer, let it speak. You remain silent. The fourth rule, the red candle must never go out while you're inside. Carry matches, carry oil, keep the flame alive. The fifth rule, never look into the mirror kept in the sacristy, not once, not even by accident. I waited for more. He gave me nothing. His gaze stayed hard, like the words themselves were punishment enough. I thought it was theater, the Vatican's way of putting weight on something mundane. The crates would be damp, the documents faded. The rules were warnings dressed in ceremony. That's all. Still, his eyes told me he believed them, and belief from a man like him carried its own kind of threat. When I returned to Boston, I tried to lose myself in the ordinary days. Lectures at Boston College, students yawning through Augustine, through Aquinas, through the questions of grace and will. They nodded politely. They took notes. And I pretended to believe that was my calling, to be the man who repeated what others wrote centuries ago. But the letter sat heavy in my pocket, and I knew every step brought me closer to St. Leonard's. The key was waiting. Sister Amber placed it in my palm. Her hand shook as she let go, though the air was warm. She was younger than me, early 30s, but her face was drawn, pale from years and shadow. She kept the side chapel. She kept the flame. She'd been told to guard the candle as long as breath stayed in her lungs. She warned me without raising her voice. Don't let it die, Father. The light keeps the room from answering. I wanted to ask what she meant, but she lowered her eyes. No more words came. Only the sound of her rosary sliding between her fingers, bead by bead. When she unlocked the basement door for me the first time, the candlelight was the only fire. The corridor smelled of damp stone and wax burned too long. My footfalls echoed as if the walls leaned close to listen. She stayed by the stairs, unwilling to follow. Her silhouette trembled in the glow. Don't look too long at the glass, she whispered. I told her I wouldn't. I wasn't sure I believed myself. Brother Dorian was different. He handled the logistics, unlocked the heavy crates, carried the boxes one by one. He was strong, direct, not afraid to speak where others kept quiet. He never bowed when Monsignor Patrick's name was mentioned. He muttered when he thought I wasn't listening. This isn't record-keeping, Father. This is something they buried. You know that, don't you? I told him I didn't. I told him the church had its secrets, but this was paperwork, nothing more. I said the rules were precaution, exaggerated for effect, but he only shook his head. They don't exaggerate, they hide, and they've sent you here to open what they sealed. One evening, as we dragged another crate across the stone, I pressed him. Why stay if you don't believe in the work? He wiped dust from his hands, eyes hard. Because someone has to see it. Someone has to say out loud what they're doing. If I leave, no one will know. If I stay, at least one man can call it by its right name. I didn't answer, because part of me wanted him gone. His suspicion weighed more than the boxes, but part of me needed him there, needed another witness in case the rules proved more than theater. Still, I convinced myself the task was ordinary, that the archive was nothing more than history too fragile for sunlight. I believed it because belief made the hours bearable. I believed it because I didn't want to think about why Monsignor Patrick never smiled when he spoke the rules, or why Sister Amber lit the candle even at noon, or why Dorian's eyes stayed fixed on the floor whenever the bell tower stirred. So I carried the key. I carried the flame. And I told myself the work would end as it began, silent, unremarkable, forgotten. The days fell into a pattern. Morning mass at the college, afternoons spent in the basement of St. Leonard's. The air was always damp, as though the stones themselves had learned to breathe. Dust clung to my cassock, soft and gray, and no matter how often I brushed it off, it returned as soon as I stepped below the chapel floor. Sister Amber lingered at the stairwell each evening, watching the flame, whispering her prayers. Once, when the candle flickered too low, I caught her trembling. I told her I had matches, oil, enough to keep it alive. She only shook her head. It isn't the wax that matters. It's the answer the dark gives when the light dies. I've heard it once, only once, and I won't hear it again. I pressed her, but she gave me nothing else. Her lips moved in the rhythm of the rosary, and she slipped away before I could speak further. Her fear felt heavier than the crates, fear that had been learned, not taught. It made me wonder how many nights she had stood there alone, holding the candle like it was the only thing keeping her alive. I remembered Rome. The long halls of the Gregorian University, the scent of old vellum and polished wood. We spoke of councils, of schisms, of the centuries where the church had nearly torn itself apart. One professor told me, half in jest, that the real curriculum was learning what not to ask. The church keeps its own silences, he said, eyes sliding away. Learn to keep yours. I had forgotten that warning until Monsignor Patrick's rules, until the silence of St. Leonard's pressed against my chest like a hand. Brother Dorian refused silence. He filled the basement with his muttering, with the scrape of crowbars and the slam of lids. He cursed when the dust blinded him, when the crates shifted under his grip, and sometimes he looked at me with an anger I couldn't place. You think this is cataloging? You think this is preservation? It's a rehearsal, Father, for what they tried before. I asked him what he meant. He leaned close, voice dropping low. The year 1452, that's what they whisper in the halls. That's the year they lost a man. Garrick, a name carved into the stone in Trier. They never say it out loud, but it's there. And now you're here, with your rules and your candle, and they'll watch you the way they watched him. I told him to stop, to keep his voice down. The words crawled into me anyway. I had never heard the year spoken in connection with the archive, but the way he said it, the way his eyes flicked toward the mirror at the far wall, I knew he wasn't inventing it. He was repeating something he shouldn't have known. That night I couldn't sleep. The college bells struck midnight, and I counted the chimes until the silence settled again. I thought of Monsignor Patrick's face, cold as marble, as he spoke the rules. I thought of Amber's warning, Dorian's anger, Rome's silence, and I told myself once more that this was ordinary work, that the rules were pageantry, that history was heavy, but it wasn't alive. Still, I woke before dawn and checked the candle in the sacristy. The flame burned steady, but the wax had dripped in a pattern I couldn't mistake. A single line, curved like a mouth, bent into a smile that hadn't been carved by hand. The first time I heard it, I thought it was air slipping through cracks, a draft where there should be none. But air doesn't shape words. Air doesn't call a name. I was alone in the basement. The crates sat lined like coffins against the wall. The candle's flame bent sideways, pulled by a breath I didn't feel. And then I heard it. Latin, whispered through stone, each syllable rough like it scraped against iron before reaching me. Not loud, not urgent, just steady. The words passed through me, half familiar from years of study. Then one rose sharp enough to cut. Mercer. My name. My blood chilled before my mind caught up. The archive had spoken, and it knew me. I told myself it was memory, a trick of the ear. I'd lectured too long, read too many fragments in too many tongues. A tired mind can make sense where none exists. I forced a laugh into the silence, but the candle trembled harder, and the laugh died in my throat. I set down my ledger and walked toward the sacristy. The mirror waited in the dark corner, taller than me. its glass dulled by age and dust. I shouldn't have looked. I knew the fifth rule, but my eyes lifted anyway, as if pulled by the same breath that bent the flame. At first, the reflection held true, my own figure, shadowed by the candle. Then, behind me, another shape, tall, robed, a mitre faint against the gloom, the lines of a man carved from memory, face pale, mouth unspeaking. I blinked once. The figure vanished. Only my own face stared back, paler than before. The mirror clouded over, and I turned away, clutching the rosary at my belt. Brother Dorian arrived minutes later, carrying a crowbar and a box of nails. He stopped when he saw me near the mirror. His eyes narrowed. "You heard it, didn't you?" I shook my head. There was nothing. He dropped the tools with a clang, the sound too loud for the narrow room. "It called your name, Father. Don't tell me you didn't hear it." I opened my mouth, closed it again. The candle wavered, as though waiting for my answer. Finally I said, "Drafts echo. Latin clings to the walls. You know how old this place is. What you heard was imagination." His jaw tightened. "You can lie to me. Don't lie to yourself." He turned away, muttering under his breath. I didn't chase him. Instead, I returned to my desk, opened the ledger, and began to write. The pen shook as it touched the page. I forced each line into the language of cataloging. Entry 1. Candle flickered beyond natural cause. Entry 2. Sound of Latin chant, indistinct, recorded as anomaly. Entry 3. Visual distortion in sacristy mirror, likely reflection error. Each word I wrote tried to drain the fear, to make it clerical, archaeological, explainable. But the paper did not believe me, and neither did I. The whispers returned the next night, louder, clearer. They circled the basement like a litany that refused to end. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the words sank through skin and bone. Amber stood at the stairwell, lips moving in prayer, candlelight carving her face into shadow and fire. I begged her to tell me she heard nothing, but her silence told me more than words could. I lit another candle, placed it beside the first. The flames leaned away from each other, as if repelled. The air grew thick, tasting of iron and incense, left too long in a closed censer. I coughed, the sound breaking the rhythm of the whispers. For a moment, the voice hushed. Then it began again, slower this time. Patient, like it had all the hours in the world. I turned to the crates, forced my eyes on the seals. Wax darkened with age, carved with symbols I didn't recognize. The first rule rose in my mind. Never read the seals aloud. I whispered the warning to myself, lips dry, as if speaking it would build a wall. I traced the marks with my eyes, but kept my mouth closed. Still, the urge came strong, like the symbols themselves pressed against my tongue, begging to be spoken. I bit down until I tasted blood. That stopped the whisper, but only for a heartbeat. Dorian returned with a lantern. He set it down hard, light spilling against stone. "Tell me what you've written," he demanded. "Anomalies," I answered. "Irregularities of architecture, nothing more." He leaned close, face pale in the half-light. "Architecture doesn't know your name, Father." I had no reply, so I wrote faster, forcing ink to cover silence. But the ledger wasn't confession, it was denial, and every line told me so. Later that night, I returned to the sacristy. The mirror waited, mute and patient. The glass carried no reflection at first, only haze like smoke trapped behind it. Then, faintly, the outline of a man. Robes, mitre, the slow lift of a hand. I staggered back, heart hammering, words caught in my throat. I wanted to pray. Instead, I whispered to the dark, "This is nothing more than memory, nothing more." The glass cleared, my face returned, alone again. But the candle hissed, throwing wax against the stone, and the whisper of my name shivered through the room once more. The next evening I returned with fresh ink, determined to anchor everything in words. The ledger would be my shield. If I could reduce the strange to language, I could strip it of power. That was the lie I told myself as I walked down the stone steps, candlelight trembling across the walls. Sister Amber was waiting again at the stairwell. Her face was drawn, the shadows under her eyes deep. She didn't ask what I'd heard. She already knew. Instead, she pressed a small vial of oil into my hand. "In case the wax fails," she said. Her voice cracked. Then she stepped back into the dark and wouldn't follow. The candle flared as if aware of her retreat. I carried it down, alone. The basement breathed around me. Dust curled in the air, stirred by no draft I could feel. The crates lined the walls in silent rows, their seals dark, their lids nailed tight. I sat at the desk, opened the ledger, dipped the pen, and forced myself to write. Entry 4, ambient sound resembling chant, unverified. The words felt clinical, safe, but the moment I set the pen aside, the whisper came again. Latin, clearer now. The words bent around my ears, thick and wet, as if spoken too close. Then the pause. Then my name, Mercer. Drawn out, stretched, almost tender. I clenched the pen until the nib snapped, ink bleeding across the page. The voice hushed. Then laughter, soft, low, echoing without origin. Not joyous, not cruel. Simply knowing. I lit another candle. The first bent away as before, flame tilting as though pushed. Wax spattered across the desk, hissing against the ink. I tore out the ruined page and began again. Entry 5, visual anomaly in sacristy mirror, likely caused by condensation. My own handwriting shook, the letters slanted, but the entry was written, and I convinced myself that was enough. Dorian entered without knocking. His boots struck hard against the stone. He froze when the whisper brushed the walls again. His eyes snapped to me. "You still claim this is nothing?" I looked up, kept my voice steady. "Nothing that can't be recorded, nothing that can't be explained." The candle spat sparks between us. Dorian shook his head, lips pressed tight. "You're lying to yourself. And when the rules break, it won't matter what you've written." I didn't answer. He left the lantern burning, but the light felt wrong, pale compared to the red glow of the candle. When his footsteps faded, the whisper returned, louder. This time, Sister Amber's voice answered from the stairwell. Not words, just prayer. A chant of Ave Maria, fragile, desperate. The two voices wove together, one sacred, one profane, until I couldn't tell which drowned the other. I covered my ears. The chant faded. The whisper bled into silence. I shouted up to her, "Enough! Don't encourage it!" But she only prayed louder, and the candle bent further, flame nearly horizontal. I scribbled into the ledger. Entry 6, auditory overlay, multiple voices, context unknown. The mirror pulled at me again. I swore not to look, but my eyes betrayed me. The haze spread across the glass, and in it, the outline of a man clearer than before. Cardinal Garrick. I knew the name from Rome. A man erased from the record, a man who vanished in the year 1452. His eyes found mine through the clouded reflection. His lips moved. No sound came, yet I understood the shape. Mercer. I stumbled back, nearly toppling the candle. Amber's voice broke into a sob. Dorian's shout echoed from the far hall. And still I bent over the ledger, forcing myself to write, as if ink could hold the world together. Entry 7. Perceptual distortion, figure resembling cardinal, unconfirmed. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My hand cramped, refusing to form the letters. I dropped the pen, pressed my palms together, whispered a prayer I barely remembered. The whisper hushed. The candle rose tall again, as if mocking my faith. I closed the ledger and swore I would not open it again that night. But the silence pressed too close, and before long I was writing once more. Writing, denying, cataloging, lying, each entry a wall, each wall thinner than the last. The ledger couldn't hold the silence anymore. No matter how many entries I wrote, the whisper returned, stronger each night. Dorian glared at me with eyes that refused to believe my denials. Amber prayed louder, her voice breaking, rosary beads clicking like bones. And the mirror grew darker, the figure more defined. It wasn't memory. It was witness. I found the manuscript on the 5th night. It had slipped between 2 warped boards at the back of the basement, hidden as though time itself tried to bury it. The parchment was brittle, edges blackened by fire, the ink still dark in places where the hand had pressed too hard. Latin letters crawled across the surface, but the header froze me in place. Trier, year 1452. I carried it to the desk, hands trembling, candlelight spilling across the words. Every line matched what I'd lived these nights, the red candle burning against impossible drafts, the whispers pressing against the ear, the mirror clouding with figures half-formed, and the final note, written in a hand, hurried and desperate. Cardinal Garrick vanished at the second toll. Only his image remains. I dropped the parchment as if it burned me. The words on the page had followed me here across centuries. Everything I thought was mine alone, fear, denial, the sick certainty that the archive breathed, was written before. I wasn't living anomaly. I was repeating ritual. The basement door creaked open. Monsignor Patrick stepped inside, his cassock heavy, his face unreadable. Amber shrank into the stairwell shadow, clutching her beads. Dorian rose, anger alive in his eyes. Patrick walked straight to the desk, picked up the manuscript, and laid it flat with reverence. "You found what you were meant to find," he said. I forced words through a throat too dry. "It's a record of failure, of a man lost. This should have been destroyed." Patrick shook his head. "The year 1452 was an accident, Father. It was trial, and you, Father Henry, are the next one." The whisper licked the stones, as though eager for his confirmation. Amber whispered prayer, faster, desperate, her words chasing his. Dorian slammed a fist against the wall. "You can't let him do this! Can't you see he's feeding you to it?" Patrick's gaze never left mine. The rules were written not for protection. They were written to ensure the right completes. One will always break. That is design. That is the point. I shook my head, my voice cracked. "You told me they'd keep me safe." He almost smiled. "Safe? No one is safe inside the archive. Not Garrick, not you, not any of us. But some of us are necessary. And tonight, it's your turn." The manuscript trembled against the desk as if stirred by unseen wind. The candle flared, casting shadows long and bent across the wall. The mirror clouded, Garrick's face almost whole now. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. "I won't read it. I won't play your part." Patrick's voice remained calm. "You don't need to read it. The archive already knows your name. It has called you. That is enough." Dorian stepped between us, fists clenched. "This ends now." Patrick didn't move. "Strike me down if you wish. The archive will still have him. You can't protect him. You can only watch." Amber's prayer broke into sobs. "Mater Dei, ora pro nobis, Mater Dei." Her voice cracked, the Latin splintering into English. "Holy Mother, don't let him go." The whisper answered her, words twisting, mocking. My name again, stretched and savoring. Mercer. The sound came not from the walls now, but from the page itself. The letters swam, ink turning liquid, dripping like blood onto the desk. Garrick's face in the mirror mouthed the same syllables. The toll of the bell began above us, once, then twice. The second rule bent in my mind. Don't stay past the second toll. I was still here. I was already breaking it. I staggered to the door, but Patrick's hand stopped me. "You can't leave," he said. "Not now. If you leave, it follows. If you stay, it ends." Dorian shoved him aside, shouting, "He's lying. It never ends. It consumes. And they call that victory." His voice cracked with fury. "You know it's true, Father. Look at what they're doing." I pressed my palms to my ears, trying to drown them both out. The bell's echo filled the basement, thick and heavy. The manuscript hissed. The candle bent low, flame horizontal. The mirror brightened with a light that didn't belong to flame. Garrick's hand pressed against the inside of the glass, slow and deliberate. My own reflection delayed, lagging behind, as if my soul resisted my body. Patrick's words cut through the roar. The first rule, the second rule, the third, they were never yours to keep. They belong to it. They're the archive's demands, and you've already broken one. That is enough to open the way. Dorian shouted in his face, "You've condemned him." Patrick didn't flinch. "No, he condemns himself. That is the only way it works." Amber fell to her knees, candlelight spilling across her veil. Her sobs matched the rhythm of the bell. The manuscript writhed against the desk, the letters shifting, reforming, whispering the litany of rules back at me over and over, until the words carved themselves into my ears. Never read, never stay, never answer, never let the candle die, never look into the mirror. Rules that promised safety, rules that demanded violation. There was no protection, only trap. And I understood then. This wasn't accident, wasn't tradition, wasn't superstition. It was design, built so that men like Garrick, men like me, would always break one. So the archive could feed, so the church could learn what it left behind. My breath broke, my knees weakened, and still Patrick watched, calm, composed, the silent witness of a man who'd seen this before and would see it again. I clutched the rosary at my belt, a bead slick with sweat, whispered words I barely believed. But the whisper answered louder, drowning me. The candle shrieked as wax hit the stone, and Garrick's face smiled in the glass. The moment the second toll faded, the archive broke open. It began with sound. A single cry, high and thin, cut through the basement. Not Amber, not Dorian, not even Patrick. A child's cry. Then another joined it, then a third, until the walls shivered with dozens of voices, weeping in perfect unison. The chapel above us was empty, yet the air filled with sobs. Each tearless cry bent the flame lower, pulled the wax into streams that hissed against stone. Amber fell to her knees, shouting the Ave Maria louder than the cries, her words shaking apart. Dorian clutched the edge of the desk, face white, voice raw. "This is wrong. This isn't God. This is rot." His shout cracked like thunder, but the cries didn't break. They only grew louder. Patrick stood still, pen scratching paper, recording without flinch. His silence cut deeper than the weeping. His calm told me this was expected. I wanted to tear the page from his hands, but the air had weight, pinning me to the desk, pressing my chest until every breath came shallow. The mirror screamed, not with sound, but with fracture. A crack split the glass, running from corner to corner like lightning frozen in place. Through the break I saw, not myself, but a sanctuary drenched in shadow. Candles ringed the altar, flames burning red. A figure in vestments stood before them, hands raised. Cardinal Garrick, alive, moving, lip-shaping words lost to time. The scene belonged to the year 1452, yet it moved now, in front of me. The past lived inside the glass. Tro began to fall from the ceiling, black flakes drifting like snow. Each piece landed on the floor and didn't scatter. Instead, they slid across stone, aligning into letters, forming words. Latin, backward, twisted into shapes that hurt the eyes. I bent low, trying to read, then pulled away as the whisper touched my ear again. The letters weren't for me. They were for it. Amber screamed the creed now, voice shredding, her words drowned by the sobs that came from nowhere and everywhere. Dorian seized my arm, shaking me hard. "Say something! Stop this!" I couldn't. My throat locked. My tongue clung to the roof of my mouth. The only words I had were the rules, carved into me, and each one was broken already. The mirror brightened. Garrick's face lifted, his eyes fixed on mine across centuries. Then another face appeared beside his, my own. Delayed, twisted, lips curling into words I hadn't spoken. "You already answered." The voice wasn't whisper now. It was thunder in my skull. I staggered back, striking the desk, candles toppling. Flames skittered across spilled wax, red light pouring over the walls. The sobbing turned to laughter, too perfect, every voice in sync, the sound of joy drained of all warmth. Amber collapsed against the stairwell, clutching her beads. Dorian roared above it all. "This is wrong," over and over, until his voice shredded and vanished beneath the harmony of the damned. Patrick kept writing, every word, every sound, his pen scratching calmly as though cataloging a library. I hated him then. Hated the stillness, the certainty. I wanted him to shout, to pray, to break. But he didn't. He only watched as the archive spilled into the world. The Latin letters on the floor twisted into a circle. The ashes spread outward, the words repeating themselves in endless loops, dragging my eyes into the spiral. I tried to look away. The mirror caught me. My reflection mouthed the words I refused to speak. "You already answered. You always answer." My knees buckled. The room spun red. The cries, the laughter, the bell's phantom echo, all collapsed into one single note, deep enough to shake bone. I pressed my hands to my ears. It didn't help. The sound was inside me now, rewriting the silence of my soul. Amber's scream tore through, a prayer not in Latin, not in English, only raw sound ripped from faith that had nothing left. Dorian dragged me toward the door, but the handle burned hot, searing his palm. He cursed, pulled back, knuckles blackened with ash. The archive didn't want us gone. The archive wanted us held. The mirror cracked again. Shards fell but hung in the air, suspended, each piece carrying fragments of the past. I saw Garrick's mouth move. I saw men kneel. I saw candles melt into rivers of blood. I saw myself, older, bent, repeating his gestures. Every shard was future and past at once, every reflection waiting for me to step inside. "You already answered." This time it was my own voice, not from the mirror, not from the whisper, but from my chest, vibrating my ribs. I collapsed, rosary biting into my hand. The beads snapped, scattering across the floor, rolling into the spiral of ash. Each bead hissed as it touched the words, smoke rising like incense. Amber clawed at the steps, dragging herself upward, still praying. Dorian kicked at the crates, smashing lids, splinters flying. He roared at Patrick, spit flying. "You did this," Patrick wrote still, voice flat. "It was always going to happen. This is the design." The red light swelled until walls vanished. We were no longer in Boston, no longer in St. Leonard's. We stood in Trier, year 1452, in the sanctuary Garrick had bled into. The same sobs, the same spiral of ash, the same mirror, whole and waiting. Time folded. The past wasn't past. It had only been waiting. And the archive laughed with every voice at once, a sound too perfect for earth, too broken for heaven. Morning came like ash. I woke on the stone floor, back pressed against the desk. The candle burned to a stump. The air hung still. The spiral of letters was gone. The mirror stood whole again, unbroken, its surface dull, showing only my own face pale and drawn. For a moment I believed it had all been dream, but the silence was too heavy. Dreams don't leave silence like that. I climbed the stairs. The chapel above was shuttered, windows sealed, doors barred. A notice had already been posted in the vestibule, closed for renovation, no signature, no date, as if the night had rewritten the day before it began. Amber was gone. Her rosary lay broken on the first step, beads scattered like teeth. Her veil remained folded on the pew. Nothing else, no body, no trace. I called her name once. The sound died against the stone. I didn't call again. Some names you don't want answered. Dorian lived, but his eyes were empty. He sat in the corner of the sacristy, rocking slow, lips moving without voice. His hands clawed at nothing, fingers black with ash. When I touched his shoulder, he flinched, muttered words I couldn't catch. I leaned closer. One phrase cut through the breath. Still laughing. He wouldn't say more. He wouldn't look at me. They took him away before noon. 2 men in plain black suits. They didn't ask me questions. They didn't tell me where. I never saw him again. Patrick was the only one unchanged. He closed the ledger, stacked the crates, and gave orders as if nothing had happened. His voice was calm, even. "Seal the door. This chapter is complete." Then he left. Not a word of explanation, not a glance back. As though I'd been a tool he no longer needed. I remained. I don't know why. Perhaps to prove I wasn't broken. Perhaps because there was nowhere else to go. The hours dragged. The silence never eased. I sat with the candle stub, turning it between my fingers, and wrote this account in the same ledger Patrick had closed. Not for the Vatican, not for record, for myself. Because if I don't write, the night will spill into every day, and I'll never know which world I'm in. I thought I was sent to guard against evil. I see now I was meant to feed it. I wasn't protector. I wasn't witness. I was instrument. They needed a man who would obey the rules long enough to break them. That's all I was. A hinge in a door they wanted open, and I opened it, not with prayer, not with sin, but with fear. Fear is answer enough. Sometimes at night, I still hear Amber's voice, thin and breaking, drowning beneath the sobs. Sometimes I see Dorian's eyes, vacant, watching something no one else can see. And sometimes I see Garrick smile in the mirror above the wash basin. Only for a second. Only long enough to know he never left. He's still waiting? And so is it. I tell myself to leave, but my feet don't move. I tell myself to forget, but the silence remembers for me. So I stay. I stay and write, word after word, hoping the pen can cage what the archive released. But cages don't hold whispers. They pass through. They settle in the cracks of your mind and wait. I'm tired now. My voice feels thin, my chest heavy. Maybe this is the last entry. Maybe someone will find it. If they do, they'll see the circle complete, because I can hear it again, faint, from beneath the floor. A child's voice, patient, reciting the prayer too slow, too careful. The same sound I heard the first night, and I know it will never stop. Not until another name is called, not until another man is sent with rules that can't be kept. It's speaking now. The words rise through the stone. They're soft, but I can hear them. The same syllables, the same cadence, and then my name, stretched and lingering. Mercer. I cover my ears. It doesn't help. The voice is already inside. I try to sleep, but sleep never stays. Each time my eyes close, I wake to the same sound, the scrape of nails against wood, the hush of a child's breath. Sometimes it comes from the floor, sometimes from the walls. Once I swore it rose from my own throat. I walk the chapel at dawn, though the doors are locked. Dust covers every pew, yet I find footprints that aren't mine. Small, bare, circling the altar. I follow them until they fade into shadow. The candle stub still sits on the desk below, wick black, wax hardened. I tell myself I won't relight it, but my hands reach for matches anyway. The flame leaps red and thin, and the silence shifts, listening. The archive hasn't gone. It never goes. It only waits for the next man, the next rule broken, the next voice to answer. And I know one truth now. I wasn't chosen for strength or wisdom or faith. I was chosen because I would break, because I already had. If you're hearing this, then you already know too much. I don't know who you are. I don't know why this recording reached you, but I know the pattern. Once a voice carries, it doesn't stop. It finds another ear, another life, another man to break. If they ask you to guard the archive, don't say yes. If they hand you 5 rules and tell you it's for your safety, understand this. The rules are not for you. They're for it. Every line is written so you'll fail. Every warning is a door waiting to open. You can't keep them all. No one can. And when one breaks, even by accident, the archive takes breath again. I thought silence would protect me. It didn't. I thought faith would shield me. It didn't. I thought the church wanted me safe. They didn't. They only wanted me present. They only needed a name to answer. Mine was enough. Yours could be next. Don't trust the candle. Don't trust the bell. Don't trust the man who tells you he carries truth from Rome. Because the archive isn't a place. It's a hunger. It doesn't care about stone or paper. It only cares that you hear, that you listen, that you believe enough to fear. Fear is all it needs. And once you feel it, you've already answered. I can still hear the child's voice under the floor. It repeats the same prayer, too slow, too careful, like it's savoring each word. It never finishes. It never stops. The circle always begins again. One day, someone will come with new rules. One day, another priest will kneel in the dark and swear he won't break. But he will. And the archive will laugh again. If you think you're strong enough to resist, you're wrong. If you think you'll follow the rules better than I did, you won't. If you think the Vatican chose you because of faith, it isn't faith they measure, it's fracture. They'll pick you because you can be broken. And when you break, they'll write it down, close the door, and wait for the next name. So listen to me. Leave if they ask. Burn the letter. Destroy the seal. Don't walk through the door. Because once you hear your name, once the archive speaks it, there's no leaving. Not in body, not in silence, not in prayer. It binds deeper than faith, deeper than blood. And once you answer, even in fear, it never lets go. If you're still listening, stop now. Stop before it learns your name.